tonight we are here to talk with Ricki Cardenas. Now, Ricki is going to be joining us here in a second, I assume. Is the author of 2 books. Hey, Ricki. She's the author of 2 books, and I always have to say this very slowly because I want to transpose words.
Everybody does.
Swipe, Mr. Right Swipe, and Switch and Bait, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what? I did it right. That's amazing.
Good job.
Both of those were released through Grand Central Publishing, and I'm always pleased to be able to talk to you, but we're glad to have you, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is exciting, and I'm nervous, but hey.
I have no idea why. You'll do fine. I could literally disappear and just let you talk for an hour, and you'd be fine. But
wow.
well, I mean, you'll be fine. I don't know about everybody else, but
that's true. I'll be like, what? It's like when I don't know if you guys use Marco Polo, but I do that with my friends a lot, and it's just like one-sided. I'm like, wow, how long have I been talking? Are they gonna really listen to this? So hey, anyway. Okay.
Right. It's important to note that everybody that Ricki is a teacher, so she knows how to silence.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So one of the main things that we want to talk about tonight is editing, but we also have some other topics that we're going to cover as well. And for those of you who are in attendance, there are 2 options for you to engage. One, we have the chat, which is run by the lovely Jessica Nettles of the Broadleaf Writers Board of Directors and Conference Committee. And she is there to address any things you may have for chat purposes, and she'll be dropping links for things we talk about or things relative to programming that we run. But if you have questions for Ricki or for some odd reason me, there is a function at the bottom of your screen that's a Q&A. So when you have a question, all you have to do is just go in, pop that screen up, type your question, and I'll try to field those as we go along rather than waiting to the end. So go ahead and get those questions in as you have them, and we'll get them answered as best we can. But we are here to talk about editing, and so before we launch into editing, I've mentioned the 2 books that you had published, and now those were considered.
You want me to grab them? They're right over here.
I mean, if you feel the need, that's entirely up to you. Okay. So you have the 2 books that are published, and they are considered to be women's fiction, kind of a rom-com, literary rom-com kind of thing, and very satirical look at dating life, whether through the internet or in person, which is interesting because now I've known you for a while, and those were not the books that you were initially going to write, but you ended up writing them anyway. So that leads me to my first question, which is, and this would be advice for writers, if presented an opportunity to write what can sell versus writing what you want, what should a writer do?
Whew, that's a good one. Well, I mean, it's one of these things. So yeah, when I started out, and actually, well, I don't know. So you and I met at
which I will bring up.
Southeast. What? Yeah.
No, it's James River Writers Conference, 2000.
Oh yeah, but we had both been to Southeast. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the connection there. Yeah. Who are you? No, I'm just kidding. So sorry about that. But yeah, so when my very first conference though was Southeastern Writers, and yeah, I knew that you had gone to that. But when I first submitted something there, so this was back in, gosh, I think like 2008 or something, and I had just read, Twilight. I have some, if there's any Twilight fans out there, I knew that it wasn't like written super well, but I also knew that I was devouring it. And I mean, it came at a time where, I hadn't read anything in a long time, and I was just starting to like get into the idea of writing. So I read those, devoured those, but I was trying to write something. I was actually trying to write what I thought was, I didn't really call it women's fiction, but I was trying to write what I actually ended up publishing then. I went to that conference and I submitted something. There were like different categories that you could submit, for awards. And I submitted a chapter or whatever it was, 20 pages or something for their romance award, and I won it. Now, this is a very small conference, so I was probably the only one that entered, but that was like a huge confidence booster So at that conference, I thought, hey, but also at that conference, there was an editor there. I submitted those same pages for her to just give me a critique. And she said, I think what this is, I think at the time that never ended up being anything, but I think it was like a college age girl pretty much doing like some of the same stuff that I did, because that's what everybody ends up starting, writing out. This is what I did. I'm sure somebody will find it interesting. But so that editor said she really liked it, but she said that she thought my voice was a little more YA. And so she suggested, it was actually Deborah Brown. I'm not sure if you know Deborah Brown, but I know she's on the Atlanta scene. So she said that, and that's why I started writing YA. I kind of turned that idea for that manuscript into young adult. And then I got an agent with the young adult, but then never sold the young adult. So back to your question, 10 hours later, so I did try to write, and I tried to write a couple different young adult novels, and I always came very close, but then I don't know, it's just like one of those things where I think market wise, it wasn't like, it was okay, it was pretty good, but just not enough. And so, yeah, so I just happened to be at this conference, or no, it wasn't a conference, but one of my friends, Zach has heard the story like, I don't know, 150 times, probably even more.
And I will hear it 150 more.
And who knows, maybe, I don't know if I'm getting better or worse at telling it, but yeah, I came to write what I'm writing now because I was at a friend of mine. We both had the same agent, and it was her debut, and it had just come out, and we were all at this party, and we were talking, and at the time, I was like, not super recently divorced, but divorced and single for a long time, and I guess ready to mingle, doing the online dating thing. And I was in this kitchen with a bunch of married ladies, and my agent was one of them. And I don't know if I pulled up like Tinder or one of those, Bumble, one of those stupid things. But I think I must have, and they were like, oh, what is that? They were so, into what the idea of this was, because they would never look at that because they're married. And I was like, oh man, I was just being really sarcastic about, all of the, pardon my French, douchebags that were on there, that I would be like, yeah, I'm not, I would be swiping left and everything. So anyway, fast forward to about a week later, my agent emailed me, and she said, this thing that you just turned into me, it's nice and it's fine and everything, but I think what you should be writing is what we were talking about in the kitchen. And I was like, ugh. So your question was, and I ended up, I did sell that. That was Mr. Right Swipe, which originally was called Love Me Tinder.
Which is a better title.
Well, it is. Look at this though. So the French version, they didn't change it.
Yeah, well, they didn't have to deal with lawsuits.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't know. If they did, they never sued me. But anyway, so yeah, so I sold that off of, it was like 90 pages or something, and I think basically they heard the word Tinder and they were like, oh, people are doing this Tinder stuff. So I got lucky. And now I would say, should you write something like, you shouldn't, this doesn't mean you should write to the market, because that wasn't really like the market, but and you really shouldn't do that, because once something is on the market, it's usually about 2 years too late. Like it was hot. People were picking it up 2 years ago, because that's how long it takes to publish things. So, I mean, I wouldn't write to the market, but if it happens to be something that, like I had a lot to say about online dating and the way that the dating world was post-divorce. So I had a lot of things to say about it, and I had a humorous take, and it was fine. It was something that I knew, and I did really, like, Mr. Right Swipe was a very easy book for me to write. And so, I mean, I think that made it great. But as far as like, if you have somebody and they're telling you, well, this is what, I mean, you should listen to people. If they're telling you, that like when I have clients, editing clients all the time, I might look at something and say, I think maybe you could take it in this direction, or add this character, and X, Y, and Z could happen. I mean, if they're getting something from reading your writing, or even just from knowing your personality, give it a whirl and see where it takes you. Because yeah, I didn't think I was going to be opening up about dating stuff as much as I did, but hey.
Well, I mean, now you're not dating anymore. You've taken care of that. So, are you still working on books in that genre, or are you trying to write something else?
That is a very good question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We can just stop now.
Yeah. The end. Thank you. Good night. No. So I actually wrote another. I'm still kind of wanting to do a young adult if I can. I'm a teacher. I'm around a lot of young adults. I love young adult novels. And my agent still is kind of like, we need to get a young adult one out of you. So I actually wrote one last summer and we sent it out this past year and it did not sell. And that was a bummer. I shouldn't send it to that many places, but I think like 5 places. But so it didn't sell, and she was like, okay, you know what, let's pull back from this, and what else you got? So now what I'm coming up with, and I really am not actively working on something because I've just started school again. This is my 2nd week into school. And I just got a couple of editing jobs for the fall here. So I'm not actively doing it, but I'm working on a synopsis that is adult. And I don't know that it's going to be like dating, but I think it will be a single person, yes, in this scenario. And it will still be, you were talking about what the genre is. It's like a very clunky, upmarket humorous women's fiction is a snooty way of saying like rom-com or chick lit. Nobody wants to say chick lit. It's chick lit, and I'm sorry, like that doesn't go out of style. You can say what you want about it or act like whatever, but upmarket humorous women's fiction. So it still will be that, yes, but will there be dating apps? I mean, I kind of hope not, but we'll see. We'll see where the story takes me.
Well, after writing those 2 books, you didn't need a dating app anyway. So, maybe that's where your story's at.
Well, I don't know. Maybe.
And so, but let's talk editing. Now, you just mentioned that you have some editing clients that you're going to be doing some work for this fall, and that in addition to teaching, that is one of your things that you do. Now, in your experience with helping your clients work on editing their manuscripts, what is the most common advice that you've had to give them?
I would say there are about 50,000 ways that I explain and that I say per manuscript, like a full or a partial manuscript of show, don't tell. Usually, because it can be a lot of different things. It can be, a lot of times, especially if it's first person, people are doing a lot of internalization. Even if it's not, they're doing, I call it internalization. I don't know if that's a technical term, but like their thoughts. So you start with the scene and then all of a sudden they go off on this long tangent about something else, and it's the character's thoughts. And especially when you start out writing, I feel like you think you can't do without that. You're like, well, how am I going to show that? And really, once somebody points that out, you really don't need it. And it feels like, what? How could I cut all that out? The scene would be so much shorter. But I end up like kind of showing them ways to beef it up with, well, you can show this. You can show that they're angry by having them, slam the door instead of, a big diatribe of whatever. But so did that answer your question? Oh,
well,
yeah,
because the most common advice is the show versus tell, and that does seem to be the one thing that takes longer for folks to understand. The idea of being able to show an action rather than explaining to us the way a character's feeling, kind of thing. So.
Yeah, and I think that I think people get like I always feel a little bit like a broken record in their notes, because I'll go through and I'll be like, this is showing, this is or this is telling, this could be snip this. And, I try to give them, like I said, I try to give them different options of how you can fix that. But which isn't to say that you can't have any telling. And I think that's something too that, you can be, there has to be some, but I think for the most part, you got to pull back. Almost 100% to really be able to feel like, okay, this is something that I can't really show, so I have to stick that back in there.
Right. So listening to you talk about, the notes that you give your clients, or, the constant sort of hitting the same point over and over, makes me think that, as a writer, when I'm editing my own work, I feel very safe and secure about it. But when somebody else is editing it and they're giving me notes, my first reaction to that is usually kind of not hostile, but it's just like, what are you doing, kind of thing. So
you don't know my life.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, when you're dealing with somebody, how do you thread that needle, working, to give people the actual advice and input that they need to make their manuscript great, while also being mindful of the fact that it is a human being you're trying not to crush?
Well, I mean, I put disclaimers throughout a lot of times. Especially, I do a lot of critiques like for conferences and stuff too. And those are usually quicker. It's like 10 pages and I'm not as extensive. I put more general notes and I'm always like, look, 'cause I see a lot of just say memoirs in those things. And one of the things, first of all, also everything I say that's like, this is an editing rule or something that I go by, I know, and actually I say this to them too. I know that you could pull a book off the shelf and say, well, look at this, Stephen King did this and J.K. Rowling did this and somebody that just published something yesterday did this. What do you mean no prologue? What are you talking about? This person looked in the mirror. And, everything I say, of course you can find examples of people that have done it and have done it recently. And so I don't know what I can say to you other than, and this, I do say this to my clients, I mean, not in a mean way, but you're not Stephen King, you're not, you're not these different people. And, when you are, cool. But for right now, like, I just try to approach it like this, that everything I'm telling them, I'm trying to keep people from saying no. So, as far as we can get people reading it as possible. And then also just providing actual concrete examples, because I know, especially, you can't just say, and if you've gone to conferences or heard any writers speak about, you hear show, don't tell, it kind of loses its meaning. So, I mean, one thing I think is just showing the sheer amount maybe on a page, which might be daunting. And I say that I am not doing, like, I actually have a line that I'll be like, I'm not pointing all these things out to be cruel. I'm trying to show you on this page, how many times you're repeating this one thing, because it's something that's tripping me up. It's stopping the narrative, and you want to just make sure that you don't give people a reason to stop and say, wait, what was that about? So I just try to be really supportive, and give them concrete examples of, okay, and I can't do this for every sentence, but I do it a lot. Like, okay, here's a paragraph that's too long and it's just kind of clunky. I think this is what you mean with this sentence. And then I might rewrite it and say, and I always say, you can probably write something better than this, but let me show you, what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm getting out of it. And here's how it could be tighter or more active or whatever. So I just try to be thorough.
So
sometimes,
that's right. Thorough is good. So show versus tell, and the other things that you run into. Where do you fall on word count? Since that's it's a target usually, but it's also very important in editing. Do you tend to be, like in your own work? Do you tend to be an overwriter that's willing to edit back, or do you like to write under a target and then add to it?
Well, I think, word count is very important. And it's something that a lot of brand new writers really don't even think about, because, especially ones that'll send pages into a critique, I'll read something and I'm like, man, there's a lot of telling in here, I think to myself as I'm reading it. And I usually get like a query letter then too, and it'll say, I've seen some that were like, this one said it was 200,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And so something like that, I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. There was one like that, but, I mean, first of all, I think no matter what you're writing, now this is kind of a blanket statement, people could be mad, whatever. No matter what you're writing, if you're trying to go out there and get an agent or an editor, depending on what you're trying to do with things, I would try to keep it under 100K. I would say if it's like 110, 100 or 100 right now, get it to like 89. And that sounds really crazy because it's like, where did all, these thousands of words go? But you can do it. I also will give ways that they can do it, even little tricks that can help. But word count for me, like, I know that the stuff that I'm writing, it could be comfortably anywhere from 55K, which is on the shorter end, obviously, but to like 85. 85 would be pretty long for something that I'm doing. I tend to, I mean, my target is usually around 60, 65. For me, and it just kind of depends. Like, I think Mr. Right Swipe ended up being 73,000, and when I wrote Switch and Bait, I was like, man, like I'm I'm like, where, I feel like it was around 60, and I'm like, how was I thought Mr. Rice Pipe was shorter, and then I
Mhm.
looked at it, and I'm like, how was that 73 or whatever? So, but I think it ended up being around 65 or 68. So I kind of stay around there, but it is important. It's important that, if you are sending this out places, agents, editors, that you read in your genre, but also you research in your genre and figure out, because there's plenty of places that will give you a target, but as far as what not to go over, like I said, 100K,
Yeah.
I would stay away from it, because really, I mean, even if you're writing some kind of epic, whatever, make it less epic when you're sending it out, and
Yeah.
just a little bit less epic. Like, I think
Yeah.
85 is on the long side, just to not scare an agent from saying, man, it's 110, and you might say, well, yeah, but they're just going to fall in love with it. They might, but they might also say, because really they're looking for like near perfection for the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had many conversations with literary agents, and I get asked often by our members and attendees that, what is the range of word count that you're looking for, and what I'm told is for fiction you want to be somewhere above 50,000, but no more than 90,000 words.
Yeah.
Whereas YA is more of a 45 to 65,000. Middle grade is 45,000 is a maximum, and usually somewhere 35,000. Where you get into a
Yeah,
bit of,
there's like these little rules.
yeah, but where you get into a rub with it is with fantasy, because fantasy can be both general fantasy and epic fantasy, and that tends to be much more world building, and words grow from that. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Well, and it depends on, not to cut you off, but it also depends on, like, if you, oh, here's another one that kind of goes along with one of your other questions, but I think it's important because I see a lot of this, is like, it also depends on how many point of view characters you have. You might have, I mean, I saw one where somebody intended that they had 5 different points of view.
Mhm.
And what I say is, like, okay, that's a lot. Like, if there's any way that you can cut it to 2 or 3, like by combining characters, I know that's like crazy because you love all 5 of these people. And usually those, when you have that, these people are envisioning, they've got a whole series that they may or may not have already written, and each book follows one of the people. And it's great that they're like having that enthusiasm, but that's where I try to step in and get them to think about it more in a business sense of, like, okay, what can we do to trim this? But, every time that you have another point of view, it, he's laughing, you're making me nervous.
No, I'm sorry. I just saw something in the chat, had nothing to do with you.
The flash fiction thing, I saw that.
Yeah, the flash fiction. John, who is doing our workshop tomorrow, is very clever and also very long-winded with words, but that's an entirely different thing.
But yeah, I mean, every point of view that you have, it makes it more complicated, the writing, and it's not necessarily bad, but it does complicate it more, and because each person has to have their arc and they have to be fulfilled, and that makes it longer too. So, I mean, that's another
Right.
way to cut, is if you have 16 POV characters, you
Right.
might have 4 books there. I don't know, but
Well, let's cycle back to talking about you as an editor of your own work. So when you are working on a manuscript, what is your process like from writing the first draft to the edits that follow?
I edit as I go, pretty much. Which the only time, so I mean, sometimes it'll take me a very long time, but what changes that is when you have a contract and you don't have that luxury. Like with Switch and Bait, I basically had to finish it. I don't know. I want to say I wrote that book in like maybe 8 weeks or something. Like, I had to finish it when I finished it, and I was really stuck. And so that was the only time that I wrote anything out of sequence. But you know what? I did it. I did it. Somehow I rallied. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, my process, I have, so I don't know, there's nothing. My husband drew this because for quarantine, we had to share this office. So he actually moved the desks to a position that I hate them now, but that's okay. And he drew this thing on the board of like where we're allowed to sit. And anyway, it was just goofy. But that's where I usually have like these crazy, Save the cat, like I put all the beats down, you know, all 15 beats, and I've got my dramatic arc that I do with my kids at school every day. You know, I have all that kind of stuff, and I'll write down oh, here's something I have right here. This is when I'm plotting stuff out. I've got this document that's like this is like usually my target thousands of words, but it tells you for each beat how many thousands of words it should be in the manuscript. It's just like a dorky thing, but so I kind of do that, and I just start out and I just write once I have those things in place. It's not that it can't change from my original outline, but most of the time it doesn't change largely. You know what I mean? Like I will have figured it out, but I feel like I have to figure out the puzzle before I start doing it. And then yes, I let the characters do their thing on the page and whatever. But before I can really move on to the next chapter, I keep going over that chapter, and it isn't really until it's like right for me. So then I might sit down the next day, and then I go back to it, and I go back. If I wrote the whole chapter, I'll go back one chapter, read it through again, do a little bit of tweaking, and then I feel like I'm back into it. But it's funny because even when, you know, I feel like I think the same every time I look at it, like the same things will bother me. So if I've looked at it, you know, 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, you know, I'm still tripping over this one word, I'm like, I better change that, because every time I see that word, I'm going to remember, no, you know, or I should have done something better there. So I'm very hard on myself, and sometimes it takes me longer because, yeah, I can't like get past it. But usually because I have the framework in place, like I write the synopsis first, that helps me. And I'm like, okay, this beat, when I get to such and such 1,000 words, that's around where I need to be. And I have a sense of like, it feels complete, and I'll go on.
Which actually kind of leads into a question that we have here from Marianne, who was asking if you plan out all your books before you start writing.
I do. I don't know. I'm kind of type A about, I mean, not about the dishes or the laundry, but about my work. So I do plan it out. I feel like I have to. I am not a pantser. I really envy pantsers because they probably, you know, sleep better than I do. I don't know, but I just like, and they're probably not as uptight as I am, but I'm just not wired that way. I have to at least figure it out. And then, yeah, then maybe as I'm writing it, something will occur to me, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like you know, and it might've been something that I never would have thought I would have veered off in this direction. But, I mean, largely I'm not usually, that might be like, I might add a character or something like that, but usually what ends up happening isn't wildly different than what I came up with at first. Maybe that's the problem. No.
Marianne had a follow-up question on that. She was asking how long it takes when you're doing all that planning before you actually start writing.
You know, I think it really depends. Like I had hoped this summer, especially like I've been home since March 13th. So I thought I was gonna have all this time, you know, and then once school ended a little bit early for me, I thought I was gonna have all this time. I had this, yeah, the YA didn't sell. I'm like, okay, I have this other idea, and I was really jazzed about it. And I just like, I couldn't finish it. So right now, I mean, it just really depends. There was a lot of other things in the way, or were a lot of other things in the way. So, I mean, sometimes it takes a long time, and I feel like though, I'm to the point where I let myself, I'm like, okay, I know I'm just not ready yet. And I can't be mad about it because I'm not on deadline. I work well under pressure. So if somebody would just give me a contract and be like, you have to write it by now. I mean, I know, right? Everybody would like that. But if somebody would just do that, then I think that would help me. But
So what you're saying is you want the overthinking to be removed from the equation.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. And also it's just like, okay, well, I have to do this. So, you know, but
Yeah.
like, and then also just being excited about it. Like I came up with the title for my working new one, and well, I don't know if I should say it. It's called Bad Sandy. All right. I love the title, but anyway, so I was Rizzo once in high school, but anyway,
Okay.
so, but once I came up with that, I was like, okay. And then I wrote, it did help me, like it unlocked something, and I wrote like the first third of this synopsis, and then, you know, then school started. So we'll see when I go back to it, but I really like it. Like, I really think I'm onto something. And so, So that's a terrible answer to your question, Marianne, but sometimes it takes a long time and sometimes it doesn't.
Well, we often as writers learn by reading other books, but we can also learn by editing other people's work. So, in your experience in editing other people's manuscripts, what have you learned about yourself as a writer that you've been like, oh, I do that too, kind of thing?
I think that's a really hard question.
Good.
No, it really motivates me. Like, sometimes I'm like, why am I doing this editing stuff? I should just be writing, but I really love it. I really do love it. And I really do love, especially now, like when I do these critiques, I love meeting with the people when we can actually see each other. The last conference I was at, it was right when they were like, don't shake anyone's hand. It was in February. I think, yeah, you were there.
Yeah,
and
it was Mario. It was the Atlanta Writing Workshop. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was kind of strange, but now we do these phone calls, and I did like a little critique week promo like a month back, and I just love talking to people. So it really does motivate me. You know what does? Their excitement and their enthusiasm, because they haven't been beaten down by the system yet. No, that's helpful to me, is to see them doing some things that maybe I wouldn't do, because I'm like, oh, well, I shouldn't. Like, I do fall into these things of, well, this is a rule, don't do this. But then somebody might do it, and I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't do a prologue, and I might tell them that, but it's pretty good, So being free and not a crazy person like me, that, and then also just, I'll notice certain hangups. Like, I'll be like, oh yeah, there's certain words that I use a lot. And I know what they are, and I'll just kind of laugh because I'll notice, I notice it on those people, and then I can tell them, just do a search for this word, because you'll find that, reduce it by 80%.
Mm-hmm. Well, hold on and make sure she comes back. Well, anyway, while we're waiting on Ricki to come back, again, we have a lot of storms going through here, so it's possible her internet service may have gotten kicked out. But if you'll note in the chat that Jessica is running through there, one of the things that she mentions is Save the Cat, which I know Ricki and I have talked about many times before. If you haven't explored Save the Cat, it is one method of storytelling. Hey, there she is. She's back.
I was there. I could hear you. I just couldn't, like,
Oh, okay.
I don't know. You were frozen, but I could hear you. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, that sounds like something I've heard before. Anyway, so editing, we'll just jump right back into it here. Editing can give a writer a much cleaner look at the work they've created and help them to see it more clearly, which can be a positive thing, but it can also turn into a rather deflating thing where you wrote it and you felt like it was the most wonderful, awesome, glorious thing you've ever written, and then there's time for somebody to edit it, or you edit it, and it doesn't come off that way, which introduces us into a topic that we're going to talk about called imposter syndrome, where you begin to feel like, well, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't something I should be doing, maybe I'm not good at this at all. Now, one, I know this is kind of a loaded question to any writer, but do you experience this? And two, if you do, how do you cope with it?
No, I don't. I'm just kidding. I'm good. No, of course, yeah. I don't know, alcohol. I should say like working out, but that's not really true. I mean, that would be constructive. I mean, yeah, it's something that never really goes away. And, and I know I was going to say like Danielle Steele. I don't know. I just pulled like but I know that. Okay. But I do have, like, I have to remember and remind myself and come up here to my office and look at the bookshelf over there and say, okay, I've got books. Okay. And even if you don't have them and, yet, look at the manuscripts that you've written. I mean, think about the journey that you've gone through. I mean, that's a big deal. Most people, and you know this, all of you guys know this, that, whatever you've written, people are always like, oh, I would love to write a novel about whatever. Like when they hear that you're a writer, they want to tell you about their ideas, but they don't do it. They haven't done it. You've done it, and you have to remind yourself of that. Yeah. Call your mom, who will make you feel better. I mean, I mean, really, but just, you know, and I mean, I know that that's not the industry and whatever, but you have to think about and celebrate all of the little accomplishments along the way, even if it's going to see, you know, some weirdo at a webinar like me, you know, but something like that, like if you get any little piece out of it, you know, just feeling like I did something good, you know, I'm on the right track, but just remind yourself of how badass you are, because not everybody can do this, okay? And even when you're doing it, you can't do it because it's just crippling sometimes. And then just really things like going to the Broadleaf Writers Association conference. I mean, that kind of stuff, really, that's where you know, you connect with people, and that's really important because sometimes your spouse, like, you know, I love my husband. He's never read my books, and I probably, you know, that's probably good. But you know, I try to talk to him about some of these things that bother me, and he's very supportive and makes me feel better. But sometimes, like, there might be some things that, you know, I'm trying to explain that, like, my best friend isn't going to get what the heck I'm talking about, you know.
Right.
So other writers, you know, and also here's one that I thought of because I knew you were going to ask me something like this. I don't know, stay off of, I mean, I know that we're supposed to be on social media and whatever, but like stay off of Twitter when you're having those kind of moments. It doesn't feel good to be, because sometimes it's negative, or sometimes somebody's like, something's really happening that's great for them, and you know, you feel like, why isn't it happening to me? And then you feel bad because I shouldn't be thinking that way and this and that. Just try to stay off of that as much as possible, because you don't want to be comparing yourself to other people. Just compare yourself to you. Think about where you were, you know, 2 years ago before that manuscript was written, and here it is. And hell yeah, like I wrote that, and
Yeah.
I can work with it.
And do remember that this is a common thing. We at our conference always do a panel on imposter syndrome. You know, wanting to. I mainly like to do it because I want writers to see that even writers who have achieved success in publishing their work, they still have those moments, and they still have to fight through them.
Well, yeah, you just don't know. Most people don't sit around and talk about, like, well, this manuscript got rejected. You know, it's just kind of like, okay, well, you're waiting for the next thing to announce that's exciting. But that's like, I've seen people say this, what we see online about people or whatever, it's their highlight reel, right? It's all the good stuff. And, you know, there's plenty of bad stuff that goes into that, but that's what makes it worth it.
Yep.
So we say no.
Yeah. Well, we got a few questions here, and then I have one left of my own. John, John, I apologize if I say it. Sokol, I hope is your last name. He wants to know how one becomes a professional editor. Is there any kind of standard qualification or anything you have to go through to be an editor?
Well, I mean, like, I don't have an LLC, if that's, you know, I mean, but here's how I fell into it. I was wondering if that was a question anybody was going to ask. You have to, like, so in 2008, when I started writing, and I was trying to do the same thing, I didn't really, and I just moved to Virginia, and I knew no one, and I wasn't working. I was just trying to do the writing thing, and that was a great idea. And, and I was just desperately, I was trying to meet writers. I was going to lots of different conferences, James River Writers, that's where we met. And so I had a couple, like, I got a couple critique partners, and we were writing something similar. We switched manuscripts, and I just started, like, I gave them all this feedback. And then when I got theirs back, I knew, so I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like, I knew that the kind of feedback I was giving them was a lot more detailed and a lot more researched than, you know, a lot of theirs was like, haha, that's good, that kind of stuff, which is nice, you know what I mean? But it's not really, it wasn't what I was looking for. So I don't know. I mean, in part, I think the teacher in me, I don't think I could ever divorce myself from editing. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy, you know, telling people the stuff that I've learned along the way that maybe it can help them. So, so I just started kind of doing it, and you know, then once in a while, like after, because let's see, how did I start? I don't know, I would go to these different conferences and meet people, and then I kind of wormed my way into getting to, you know, do some critiques, because I did some, I was writing a little bit for Writer's Digest books, and, you know, they offered me some editing stuff that way. So I, you know, just I collected all these little kind of editing credits, and then I just started saying, you know, I think I could do this with manuscripts. So I just did, and, you know,
Yeah. Another question we have here from Melco: do you follow a template like here's Journey or 7 Steps? I know you're a Save the Cat person, right?
I'm gonna save the cat person. Yeah. Really though, I'm gonna save the cat person. Yeah, it's because it really helped me edit. You mean like, do they mean when I'm editing? Do I follow that, or just like when I'm writing?
Yeah, I don't know if to.
Okay.
Mel, you're
I
welcome
mean,
to follow up to let us know.
when I'm editing, I end up mentioning Save the Cat a lot, and that's usually because I notice there's a lot of like with all the telling, there's a lot of exposition, and I need them to know that like there's something goofy with their well, I don't say it's goofy, but there's something with their plot. They need some help plotting, and so I do refer to Save the Cat because it's got those 15 beats, and that's pretty clear, easy read. So I do refer to that. And yeah, that this crazy thing that I showed you with all that's all from Save the Cat.
Yeah.
But
Let's see. John Yarrow. Other than showing versus telling, what do you look for in your writing to improve the quality?
well, for me, this is kind of goes along with something that you asked me that I don't think I answered. Like I tend to, because I have a theater background, and when I'm like, I'll see all of a sudden scenes will come to me and I can see the characters and what they're doing, and I hear and sometimes I'll just write down like a whole conversation. It's just, you know, back and forth. And I have to, like in my own writing, I have to go back in. It's always the atmosphere stuff that I have to add back in
Hmm.
because otherwise, I see it kind of as a play in my mind and that's what I put down, but I have to like go back. That's one of my hangups is that I have to go back and make sure, okay, I'm setting the scene. I'm giving sensory details to make them feel like they're there because they're not in my head yet. And you don't want to make it just all stage direction. I have to cut back on that too
Yeah.
sometimes.
Let's see. Mel followed up and said that answered his question. So it was about your writing and editing. You guys can keep questions coming up here, but in the meantime, I've got one that is somewhat uh, gives me an opportunity to talk about our conference. I always like to talk about conferences with writers, and that was how Broadleaf started, was as a conference, and we've just kind of built from that. But attending a conference or seminar gives you an opportunity to meet other writers, to meet the speakers, to learn and to grow as a writer. And as you mentioned, you and I met in 2011 at James River Writers, and we talked a lot then. We stayed in touch afterward. You eventually became one of the founding board members of Broadleaf Writers for a brief time. And then we've led into things like this, helping one another with our writing as we go. But and that's a fruitful relationship that was built from just a random encounter at a conference. And I'm curious, when you go to conferences, both now as a speaker and before when you were just an attendee, what do you look for?
I mean, I think a lot of it is like, what I gravitate toward. And I remember Mary Kay Andrews at a couple years ago at your conference. Like, I just really she was such like, she was speaking about when all of her, because she's so successful. And
Hmm.
just like, I look for people who are humans and who, I mean, really, that's the thing. And yes, like I'll go up and introduce myself, but I mean, I feel goofy, like, going up to her. But it was right before I think my second book came out, I think. But I mean, she was just really talking about her process, and that really helped with my with the imposter syndrome of just like being scared. I don't know, and I still take notes and things. I mean, I'm just looking for anything really. I mean, it's all really inspiring, even just to be there, because sometimes I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and you guys know, there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way of. I know I should be going to more things as an attendee. I know I should be doing that, and you know, as soon as I do go, like I'm really looking forward to October. As soon as I do go, I know how inspiring that's going to be, and just, I mean, really those connections, yes, but not connections for connection's sake, or for like maybe they can retweet something of mine, or I can hit them up later. Like really for a personal connection, because or to really listen to what like Paul Jenkins, like something that he has to say and how authentic he is.
Right.
That really like it makes you feel good, because there's so many people in the industry that aren't that way.
Right. Um, And you got to experience, because you were in Virginia for a while, and I think you went to a couple of the James River Writers conferences up there, and they did a very good they did a very good job of building a writers community up there, which in turn was the inspiration for me to do this, because I wanted to have a writing community here for myself and for others. But when you think of a writing community, what do you think? I mean, what is the image that you get, and what do you hope you can gain from being a part of a writing community?
I mean, I think it's the ability to, get feedback, honest feedback, but also, because I mean, this is something that you kind of said before, that some people, when you're editing their stuff, maybe they're not ready for it or something, that they're going to be hostile. And I think just starting out, sometimes people really are. Some people will go to a conference and think, well, here I am with, like, I have my legal pad here, and I wrote my manuscript down. I'm just going to hand this to somebody, to some agent, and they're going to sign me because this is great. So, I mean, really just a writer's community, though, it's about the give and the take. And it's about, looking to somebody who, like I said, I look to people that are much farther than I am in the industry, and I try to draw from them, but also people that are just starting out. I almost love talking to them more, because like I said, it's just inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, just the give and take, and I always feel like I can never say enough, obviously, but communication, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's communication, that's what it is. It's communication. I don't know.
When you're doing editing for clients, how long do you typically work on a manuscript?
Well, it depends. It depends on the length of the manuscript, but if it's a full manuscript, and it's like a normal length, which I would say would be somewhere, between 70 and 100K. Although 100 be a little bit, I don't see too many of them that are that long. They usually want to cut it down because it does go by the page. But so I asked for like a month for that. Although I am doing one right now. I just took one on that this lady she's got a couple of requests, and she wants me to do it in 2 weeks. So I'm kind of going to be pulling my hair out, I think, trying to make this deadline. But yeah, but generally for a full manuscript, for me to go through the way that I do, and I'm kind of slow about it. Like, I know I've done editing for other people where they've subbed out work to me, and they're like, you're good, but you're slow. And I'm like, well, it's a, I want them to get what they pay for. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for a full, it takes about a month. For partials, which are usually, partials would be like 30 to 60 pages, I ask for 2 weeks. It just sort of depends. I do query letters and synopses, that usually like maybe a week or two. It just depends on how many other clients I have as well, like things that I have lined up. But yeah, I mean, so, and the thing is, everything's different. Just like with writing, I mean, it might be that some days I can sit there for 2 hours and plug away and get a whole lot done. And sometimes, something might not be clicking with me, and it just takes forever too. So,
Right.
but then I can use that and say, I don't say like, this took me forever, but I can say this part right here, like, it's feeling slow.
Right. Right.
Please delete it. No, I'm kidding.
All right, we got a few minutes left, so if anybody has any questions, go ahead and throw them out there now. Curiosity, we've done a self-publishing seminar before, but also in the conferences and other programs, I still have the same question come up. If I'm a writer who wants to have a professional edit through you specifically on my manuscript, what kind of cost am I looking at? And I know it varies, but we're looking for just like a ballpark here kind of thing.
It really does vary. I mean, it kind of depends. Like, if you're saying with like self-publishing, for example, I've done a couple where the intent was that they were going to self-publish it. So that's like, for that, I'm not really doing my full blown, that's really more just like grammar and that kind of stuff. And that's like $3 a page, about, I would say. So that's not the kind of stuff where I'd be telling you, okay, you need to cut this, this, and this. That would be like, your commas are messed up. And I wouldn't even say it. I would just be showing you where you'd fix it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. But as far as, it just really depends on what it is.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
as far as like my full blown, like that kind of stuff, I mean, if you guys are interested, please, please shoot me an email and we can kind of talk about how many pages you're looking at and this and that. But, you know,
Yeah. Well, again, if anybody has any questions, throw them at us. We've got a couple more minutes left here. I'm just going to throw some random question at you about literary agents. And if you have any advice on the best way to go about finding the agent that's right to pitch to.
I would say research online. It's kind of, you might say, you see people say, oh, I sent 100 query letters, and that's fine. I feel like that's too many. Like if you're sending 100 query letters, you may be, I mean, maybe it's not too many. I don't know, but it just depends. I would see for everything. It's like, well, but you really would want to tailor. I would look for somebody that they do interviews online. You can find hundreds of thousands of interviews that they do online where they say specifically, this is what I'm looking for. Go to Twitter, even though I said to stay away from it, but go to Twitter and look at, because look at the personalities. Some of these people you wouldn't want to pitch to them. Go to conferences, and I mean, something like your conference, you can go and meet. First of all, they're all very nice. I don't know how you always get the nicest people, but I mean, they're all very nice.
It's not random, I can tell you that.
Well, and if they're at a conference, like they are looking, like they definitely want they're looking to build their client list if they're there. So sometimes you might think, oh yeah, I really love, this guy, and he's, he's so important, and he has all these different clients, but he's not looking. So he's probably not even going to answer you. And then, that doesn't necessarily make him a jerk because he didn't answer you, but do your research. I think that's the best way to, and then when you're querying, I would do it in batches of like maybe 5 or 6 to people that like, okay, and don't say dear agent, make sure you spell their names right and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But do that, and then see if you get 0 bites, it might be the query. Maybe it's not the book, it's the query. I don't know. But yeah, try to interact with them, but not by blowing up their Twitter feed.
Yeah.
At a conference, sure, they're expecting you to.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of end things by segueing into my own little pitch about our conference. But under normal circumstances, one of the things that I value the most is the personal interaction between attendees and speakers, and that opportunity to be able to have personal time to talk about things. And even though we're going to be online this year, one of the things that we're working on is utilizing Slack, and it's something I'm having to familiarize myself with. If you're not familiar with it, please check it out. But we're going to set up various chat opportunities with individual speakers or agents, or just chances for you as an attendee to be able to ask these questions in a forum in which you can get a direct answer, rather than these sort of, I've watched a program and heard somebody give me an answer. You can actually ask them directly. So just yet another reason I would highly recommend that, plus the lower cost for this year, since we know this has been a big pain in the butt year for everybody. Very good reasons that in addition to people like Ricki, who are going to be our speakers this year, I do put a very big importance on the quality of the speaker and the temperament of the speaker and their ability to teach and relay information. So all very good reasons to come to a conference and possibly make connections like Ricki and I did, or like I know I've done with several other people over the years. But that aside, we are at the 8 o'clock hour, and that is time. And I thank you for your time as always, and appreciate your answers. Thank you to everyone for coming out tonight, and hopefully we were able to touch on some topics that helped you with editing or whatnot. And you're always welcome to reach out and ask further questions. I'm easy to find, either online, or you can email me at zach@broadleafwriters.com. Ricki, there's plenty of links that Jessica threw up there that link to Ricki's webpage and ways to contact her. But that's all I have. So thank you very much, and I will see you, if not before then in about 2 months.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Good night.